Hello and welcome to Through the Bible with Les Feldick. An Oklahoma rancher and farmer, Les Feldick has been teaching homestyle Bible classes for 20 years in Iowa, Oklahoma, and Texas. Les Feldick's unique style of Bible teaching has made the books of the Bible come to life. When Les is teaching, it's so interesting that people say time just seems to fly by. And now, here is Les Feldick.
Okay, let's get right back into the book, and while you're looking for Matthew chapter 10, I once again like to let our television audience know that this afternoon during these 4 programs I've got all my kids and my grandkids here with us, and that may never happen again. In fact, I just doubt if it ever would. But anyway, if the camera will just take a quick pan across them. We've got Greg, my oldest son, and his wife Jeanette, and then Jerry and Laura, my daughter, and my son-in-law, and their 2 kids, Tara and Zach. And then way at the back is my youngest, Todd, and his wife Kimberly, and their 2 little babies. They're presently living out in Washington State at Pullman. So anyway, I just thank the Lord for them. They are all support in the ministry, and you know, I'm just tickled that at least my older grandkids, whenever they talk about, you know, what they wish for the future, they always qualify it if the Lord doesn't come. And so I just feel they're well taught, because that is the way we have to look at things today. We will do such and such if the Lord tarries. So anyway, we're glad to have the kids with us, and for those of you on television, always remember that all these programs are available on videotape. We can make the audio cassettes if you wish them. We're getting them in print little by little, so you write to us or call us if you're interested. All right, now let's continue then on our study of Christ's earthly ministry, and I'm going to take you all the way on this program to chapter 10, Matthew chapter 10. And again, it's a subject that I know that has raised a lot of eyebrows. It has caused a lot of questions, because after all, why? Why? Well, we're going to hopefully answer. So in Matthew chapter 10, the Lord has just called the 12 disciples in the first 4 verses. And now you come to verse 5. These 12 Jesus sent forth. Now remember, this is at the beginning of his earthly ministry. These 12 Jesus sent forth, and if you haven't underlined it, underline, or at least mark it in your computer up here. He doesn't suggest this, he what? He commands it. Now, he's the Lord of glory. And when he commands, you can't get any higher authority than that. And so he commanded them, saying, go not into the way of the Gentiles, and in any city of the Samaritans enter you not. Now the Samaritans at this point in time, you see, were half-breed Jews. They had lost their pure character as Jews, and consequently were looked down upon and detested by the pure Jew. Now of course Jesus will later in his ministry still go to the city of Samaria. Philip will go to Samaria in Acts chapter 4 or 5. But for now, Jesus is qualifying that they go not to a Gentile, not to a Samaritan, now verse 6, but rather, now remember this is a commandment, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now, I say a lot of people say, why? I thought he came into the world to save sinners. Well, you see, that's why I try to show you. Yes, that's what Paul says. But in the beginning of his earthly ministry now, he is approaching only what people? The Jew. And why is he confining it to the Jew? This is covenant ground. Remember I had it on the board? I'll put it on again until you see it in your sleep. The Abrahamic covenant was that out of Abraham would come a nation of people whom God would put in a geographical area of land, and then one day he would come and set up the government in the person of the king, but he would also have to be their what? Their Redeemer. There had to be a solution to the sin problem. And so all the way up through the Old Testament, you have these parallel lines of prophecy. The coming of a king and a kingdom, but also the coming of a suffering Savior. Now, I would like to put it this way. The Jews of Jesus' day, they wanted the king and the kingdom, didn't they? Oh, they wanted those horrible Romans thrown out. But they didn't want to deal with the sin problem. See, that got too close to home. And so here was their whole problem. But nevertheless, what you have to understand, that the reason Jesus said what he said, he had come, remember the program, I think the 3 weeks ago now on television, for this afternoon, it was our first program. You remember he said, I did not come to destroy, but to what? Fulfill? And I said he was coming to fulfill the covenants? All right, that's why he says what he says. He did not come except to fulfill these covenants, which all rested on the Abrahamic covenant, and that included no one but Jews. Now that's hard for people to swallow, I know. In fact, I guess if I were to put a title on my approach to Christ's earthly ministry, rather than be guilty of plagiarism, I'll give the credit. You know, Robert Frost wrote a poem called The Road Less Traveled. There's a book on psychiatry by a gentleman whose name is, I think, Dr. Peck, and maybe you've read that one. Again, the title is The Road Less Traveled. And that's the way I would title my approach to Christ's earthly ministry, The Road Less Traveled. Now, I'm not alone. Don't think for 1 minute I'm just some kook out here all by myself. There are a lot of people who certainly ascribe to this same approach, but we're certainly in the minority. The majority, I said a while back, they think that as soon as you get into Matthew, you're in Christianity, you're in church ground, and nothing could be further from the truth. This is law. This is Jewish. And Christ came to his own, see? And until his own receive him not, we're going to have to deal with it as under the covenant promises. All right, so mark verse 6 again, where he commands, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Because after all, this is covenant ground. And you can't take covenant promises to a Gentile. Now, let's skip over to, what is it, chapter 15, I think? Yeah, Matthew 15. Now we'll drop down to verse 21. You know, I'm always reminded of someone I heard years ago. I was riding in my pickup, had the radio on, and I imagine it was a preacher someplace in this United States, and he was preaching on this text. And I'll never forget, I was so shocked when I heard the man say it. He said, you know, you got to remember that Jesus had just begun his earthly ministry, and as yet he didn't realize the real purpose of his coming. And he was still bigoted. That was the word he used. He was still bigoted. And he thought that he had to confine his ministry only to the Jew. And I thought, oh, you poor man. How can people be so blind? He wasn't bigoted. He knew what he was doing, far more than most theologians do today. And now look in chapter 15, and we have almost the same situation. Verse 21. And then Jesus went thence and departed into the coasts of Tyre and Sidon. Now those were wicked cities, you remember, up on the Mediterranean Sea coast. Verse 22, and behold, a woman of Canaan, Jew or Gentile? Gentile. So a woman of Canaan came out of the same coasts or borders, and they cried unto him, saying, have mercy on me, O Lord, thou Son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with a demon. Verse 23, but he answered her not a word. What'd that mean? He ignored her. He totally ignored her. Right? Read on. His disciples came, and they besought him, saying, send her away, for she crieth after us. What are the disciples saying? Lord, get rid of her. She's just a pest. She's a nuisance. She had evidently been following him for maybe a day or two. And the disciples said, Lord, get rid of her. We don't need something like that tagging along.